So back in January of 2026, it felt like a dam finally broke after decades of legal and political battles. And what came flooding out? The Epstein Files. Now, this is a story that is so massive, so sprawling, it's incredibly easy to get lost. So in this explainer, we're going to try to bring some clarity. We're going to map out the biggest revelations and really try to answer the most important question of all. What did we actually learn from all this?
And when I say massive, I mean it. The scale is just staggering. In January 2026, because of a new transparency law, the Department of Justice dropped nearly 3.5 million pages of documents all tied to Jeffrey Epstein. To put that into perspective, that is an almost unimaginable mountain of data for anyone to even begin to sort through.
But, that huge number really forces the most critical question, doesn't it? Beyond just the sheer volume of paper, what do these documents actually say? What new light do they shed on one of the most infamous criminal networks of our time? Well, let's break it all down. Okay, to make sense of this whole thing, we've broken this down into 5 parts. We're going to start with how these files even became public. Then we'll dive right into the anatomy of the network and its inner circle. From there, we'll look at the massive systemic failures the files exposed. And finally, we'll tackle that huge question of accountability.
All right, first up, the Great Unsealing. Look, this wasn't some kind of leak. It was the result of a long, hard-fought legislative and legal battle that literally forced these documents out into the open.
And the real catalyst for all of this was the Epstein Files Transparency Act. In what feels like a really rare moment of unity these days, this 2025 law passed with just overwhelming bipartisan support. We're talking 427 to 1 in the House. It gave the Department of Justice a crystal clear mandate: release the entire unclassified file. And this timeline, wow, it really shows you just how long this fight has been going on. The journey kicked off way back in 2015 with just a single civil lawsuit against Ghislaine Maxwell, which generated a ton of its own sealed records. But it took over a decade of court battles, of sustained pressure from journalists and advocates, before Congress finally acted, creating the legal firepower for this completely unprecedented release of government files in 2026. Okay, so now that the files are out there, what have we actually learned about the anatomy of Epstein's network? This is where we start looking at the patterns of who was involved and how the whole thing actually worked. Now, before we look at a single name, it is absolutely critical to understand what these files actually represent. As analysts point out, these documents show connections and associations, right? Being named in a flight log or an email does not automatically mean legal guilt. What they do reveal, though, is a stunningly clear pattern of access and influence within these powerful and often very, very opaque elite circles. And this table gives you a little glimpse into that web of connections. The files document former presidents like Bill Clinton and Donald Trump in flight logs and in social settings. They've got extensive scheduling emails with Prince Andrew, and they even include emails with tech titans like Elon Musk talking about island logistics, and draft emails about Bill Gates, where it looks like Epstein was trying to leverage personal information. So let's be super clear. This is what the documents show: a network built on being close to power. Now, one of the biggest myths out there was this idea of some formal blackmail client list. The DOJ itself actually concluded in 2025 that a list like that just didn't exist. Instead, the files paint a picture of something more subtle and maybe more insidious, an operation that used the cover of massage therapy as its main tool for recruiting and grooming victims into this trafficking network. But look, an operation on this scale, it couldn't run by itself. And that brings us to Epstein's inner circle, this small group of financial and legal enablers who were allegedly running the machinery of the network from behind the scenes. Investigators' own diagrams identified this inner circle as the core operators. So while Ghislaine Maxwell was the social link, a few key men were the alleged financial and legal backbone: his longtime lawyer Darren Indyke, his accountant Richard Kahn, and his main benefactor, the billionaire Les Wexner. And the amount of money they were managing is just staggering. According to these files, just one bank, JPMorgan Chase, filed what are called suspicious activity reports on over $1.3 billion in questionable wire transfers. These are official red flags for potential illegal activity. And we're talking about huge sums of money moving through Epstein's accounts, often signed off on by members of his inner circle. And this really shows you how deeply integrated they were. Indico and Kahn, they weren't just some outside advisors. No way. They had direct control with signing authority over accounts. Lawsuits even allege they helped set up sham marriages for victims. And get this, this is the part that is just wild. Despite all these incredibly serious allegations, today, right now, these are the same two men who are the co-executors of Epstein's entire estate. They're controlling his fortune and all the records that go with it. The role of these enablers, it really points to a much bigger problem, doesn't it? The files don't just put individuals on trial, they put the entire system on trial, revealing a whole series of profound institutional failures. And you can't see that failure any more clearly than right here. The files dug up a suppressed 2007 draft federal indictment for 32 counts that called Epstein a high-flight risk. But that indictment, it was buried. Instead, the U.S. attorney at the time, Alexander Acosta, brokered that infamous non-prosecution agreement. So Epstein pleads to just 2 state charges, and in a move that shielded his whole network, the deal secretly gave immunity to all unnamed co-conspirators. As one analyst put it, this deal did way more than just offer a light sentence. It exposed a 2-tiered system of justice, one where, for the rich and powerful, justice can become a negotiable commodity. And that just shakes public faith in the entire institution. And the institutional failures didn't stop back in 2008. The very release of these documents in 2026, which was supposed to bring transparency, ended up creating a new tragedy. Flawed redaction processes led to what lawyers are calling a catastrophic privacy failure, accidentally exposing the names and sensitive information of thousands of victims, re-traumatizing the very people the system was supposed to be protecting. So all of this, the network, the enablers, the systemic failures, it all leads to the final, and let's be honest, the most pressing part of this whole briefing, the accountability question. With all this information finally public, what happens next? Well, the fight for accountability is happening as we speak. As of early 2026, the House Oversight Committee is deep into its own investigation. Subpoenas are out for those key Inner Circle members, Wexner, Indyk, and Kahn. Ghislaine Maxwell has already appeared from prison, only to plead the fifth to every single question. So, while the wheels are turning, concrete answers still feel just out of reach. And that really leaves us with the central puzzle of this entire story, doesn't it? We have this unprecedented release of 3.5 million pages of evidence. And yet, the key figures who could give us the context, well, they're either deceased, they're in prison and silent, or they're gearing up for their own legal battles. So the ultimate question is still hanging there. Will this mountain of information finally lead to full accountability, or will it just leave us all with more questions than we started with? The answers, if they exist at all, are probably buried deep inside those millions of pages. This briefing was put together from extensive investigative reporting, legal documents, and academic analysis. For anyone who wants to dig deeper, a list of our primary sources is always available online. The search for the full truth, well, it continues. Thanks for watching.